The unexpected encounter. It was a quiet evening when Mark first saw her. He had just returned home from work, tired and hungry, looking forward to a peaceful night. The small house he lived in stood on the edge of a forest, far from the busy streets of the town. It was the perfect place for someone who liked peace and solitude. Little did he know, his quiet life was about to be turned upside down. As Mark stepped inside, he noticed something strange. The door to his kitchen was open, just a crack. He always made sure to close it, especially when he was gone for the day. A chill ran down his spine. Maybe he had forgotten, or maybe the wind had pushed it open, but something didn't feel right. He moved slowly, walking toward the door. Just as he reached for the handle, he heard a soft sound coming from outside. It was a rustling, like someone or something was moving through the grass. He paused and listened. The sound grew louder. Then he saw her, a small figure, standing in the dim light, just at the edge of his yard. At first, he thought it was a child, but there was something strange about her. Her hair was bright, almost white, and her skin glowed faintly in the moonlight. She was wearing a simple, tattered dress, and her eyes were large and shimmering, unlike any human eyes he had ever seen. "Are you lost?" Mark asked, his voice steady but curious. The girl didn't respond. She just stood there, staring at him with those strange eyes. Mark felt a wave of discomfort wash over him. He wasn't sure why, but something about the girl felt otherworldly. Without saying another word, she took a step closer. Mark could now see that her ears were pointed, just like something from a storybook. They weren't like human ears at all. His heart skipped a beat. He stepped back, unsure of what to do. What was this? A prank? Or something much stranger? The girl reached out a trembling hand, her voice soft and raspy. "Food, please," she whispered. Mark blinked, not sure if he had heard her correctly. "Food," he repeated, taking a step forward, unsure of how to help. He felt a strange pull to her, a need to protect her, even though he didn't understand who or what she was. He nodded slowly and turned to go inside, keeping his eyes on her. She followed him, silent but steady. Mark quickly rummaged through the kitchen, looking for anything he could give her. He wasn't sure if she was a runaway child, an alien, or something else entirely. But he couldn't ignore her plea for food. As he brought a bowl of soup to the table, he saw the girl looking at him. Her eyes were wide, hungry, and desperate. The sight made his heart ache. He placed the bowl in front of her, unsure of what to expect. The girl didn't hesitate. She scooped up the soup with her hands and drank it quickly, as if she hadn't eaten in days. Mark watched, both fascinated and concerned. He had heard stories of people in need, but nothing like this. When she finished, she looked up at him. Her eyes shone with gratitude, but there was something else in them, something Mark couldn't quite place. She didn't speak, but her gaze seemed to communicate more than words ever could. She stared at him as if trying to understand him, as if searching for something in his soul. "Are you okay?" Mark asked, kneeling down in front of her. His voice was gentle, trying to reach her. She nodded, her expression still unreadable. Then, without warning, the girl stood up, walked to the door, and paused before leaving. Mark followed her, unsure of what was going on. He couldn't just let her walk away, not like this. "Where are you going?" he asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned to face him one last time, her large eyes filled with something Mark couldn't understand. She gave him a small, quiet smile. then turned and disappeared into the night. Mark stood there for a long time, staring out into the darkness. He felt a mixture of confusion and unease. What had just happened? Who was she? And why did he feel like this encounter was only the beginning of something much bigger? As the night fell silent once again, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't seen the last of her. Something told him that this was only the first step in a journey that would change his life forever. Little did he know, the next day, everything would change. Her mother arrives the next morning. Mark woke up to the soft sound of birds singing outside his window. The events of the night before felt like a strange dream, something he couldn't quite grasp. Had the girl really been there? Her pale face and glowing eyes, her strange ears, still haunted his thoughts. He tried to push it out of his mind as he prepared his breakfast, but something told him that the encounter wasn't over. As he sipped his coffee, Mark looked out of the window. The sun had barely risen, casting a golden glow over the yard. But something was different today. The air felt heavier, as though the world itself was holding its breath. And then he saw her, again the same girl, standing near the edge of the yard. But this time, she wasn't alone. A woman, tall and graceful, stood beside her. The woman's presence was striking. There was an otherworldly elegance to her. She had the same glowing eyes as the girl, but there was a deep strength in her gaze. Her long hair flowed behind her like silver ribbons in the wind, and her clothing seemed to shimmer in the morning light, almost like it was made of something other than fabric. The girl, standing next to her, was quiet, watching Mark with her usual intense stare. Mark's heart raced as he walked toward them, unsure of what was happening. Who were they? What did they want? He had no answers, but he had a strange feeling in his gut telling him that this was important. "Good morning," Mark said, his voice cautious but kind. He didn't know why, but he felt a connection to them, something deeper than he could explain. The woman spoke first, her voice smooth and melodic. "Thank you for helping her," she said, her words carrying a weight that Mark couldn't ignore. "You have shown her kindness when none was expected." Mark stared at her. There was something about her tone, something calm and reassuring, yet powerful. "You're welcome," he replied, still unsure of what to say. "I'm just glad." She ate. She looked hungry. The woman smiled softly, her eyes shifting to the girl standing by her side. The girl had not spoken a word yet. She simply watched Mark with a quiet, almost unreadable expression. "We are grateful for your kindness," the woman continued, "but there is more we need to explain." Mark felt a sudden shift in the atmosphere. The air around him seemed to change, growing colder, heavier. His curiosity was piqued, but fear began to stir in his chest. What were they really here for? Why had they come to him? "Who are you?" Mark asked, the question spilling from his lips before he could stop. The woman's gaze softened, but her answer was not what he expected. "We are not from here," she said. "We come from a faraway place, a world very different from yours." Mark blinked, his confusion growing. "A different world? What do you mean? Are you aliens?" The woman didn't answer directly. Instead, she glanced at the girl beside her. Mark noticed a flicker of sadness in her eyes. It was as though the girl had seen too much, experienced too much for someone so young. The woman spoke again, her voice now tinged with a quiet sorrow. "Yes, we are. Our world was destroyed. We are the last of our kind. We came here seeking refuge. We have nowhere else to go." Mark's mind was spinning. He stared at them both, trying to understand. Was this some kind of joke? Was he being pranked? The idea of an alien world sounded impossible, but the truth in the woman's voice left no room for doubt. He had no answers, no explanation. But there was one thing he knew for sure. They weren't lying. The girl stepped forward, her small hand tugging gently at the woman's sleeve. The woman looked down at her, then turned her gaze back to Mark. "We need your help," the woman said softly. "Our ship was damaged beyond repair when we arrived here. We have no way of returning home, and so, we ask, can we stay?" The question hung in the air, as if it carried more weight than simple words could convey. Mark felt a wave of emotions flood over him: sympathy, confusion, and a deep sense of responsibility. He wanted to say no, to turn them away, to protect his quiet life. But something in him, something deep and unexplainable, urged him to say yes. The girl's eyes locked onto his, full of hope and trust. She was asking for safety, for shelter, for a future she couldn't find on her own. The woman's presence seemed to ask for the same, but with a quiet grace that Mark couldn't ignore. After what felt like an eternity, Mark nodded. "You can stay," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "but I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help you." The woman smiled, the weight in her eyes lifting ever so slightly. "Thank you," she said. "We will find a way together." Mark stood there, staring at them both, unsure of what the future would hold. He had just opened his door to two strangers, two beings from another world, but deep down he knew one thing: this was just the beginning. Something greater, something far beyond his understanding, was starting to unfold, and there was no turning back now. The decision the next few days passed in a blur. Mark's quiet life had been replaced with constant questions, and despite the overwhelming confusion, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had made the right choice. The alien mother and child had settled in, but nothing was as it seemed. Every time Mark thought he understood the situation, something new would happen that deepened the mystery. The girl, whose name he learned was Lyra, stayed close to her mother, a silent presence that never strayed too far. Her strange, glowing eyes would follow Mark everywhere he went. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, he would wake up to find her standing at the foot of his bed, just staring at him. She never spoke, but he could feel her watching, as if studying him. The mother, whom Mark had learned was named Elira, seemed to keep her distance, observing him just as carefully. She didn't explain much about their past, only that their home, planet, a place full of beauty and wonder, had been destroyed by a force far greater than anything they could comprehend. They had barely escaped with their lives, and now they had nowhere to go. Earth was their last hope. Mark had tried to ask more questions, but Elira would always change the subject, or her answers would be vague, as though she was withholding something important. Every time he tried to push her for details, she would simply look at him with those deep, knowing eyes, and the conversation would end abruptly. Mark's days were filled with strange occurrences. He would find objects moved from one place to another when no one else had been near them. At night, the house would feel colder, like an invisible presence was there, watching him. Once, when he walked into the living room, he saw Lyra standing in front of a window, her hands outstretched as if she were feeling the wind, though the room was still. He asked her if she was okay, but she didn't answer, she just stared at him, her eyes filled with an emotion he couldn't place. There were moments, though, when he saw a flicker of warmth in them, a sign that maybe they were more than just strangers in need, Alira would smile when Lyra would try to help her in the kitchen, and Mark would find himself sharing a laugh with them over simple things. It felt normal, in a way. But Mark knew that normal had left the building the moment they knocked on his door. The most unsettling thing, however, was the growing sense of fear Mark couldn't shake. The longer the two stayed, the more he felt a strange connection to them one. That made him feel protective of Lyra and Alira, but he also felt the weight of an invisible threat hanging over them. He wasn't sure if it was his imagination or something deeper, but every time he looked at the sky, he felt as though he was waiting for something, waiting for the other shoe to drop. One evening, as Mark sat in his living room, the door suddenly opened. Alira stood in the doorway, her eyes focused, her face as calm as ever. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice steady but filled with a sense of urgency. "It's time you knew the truth." Mark stood up immediately, his heart racing. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. The moment where everything would make sense or fall apart. What truth? Mark asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though he could feel the tension rising inside him. "What have you been hiding?" Alira stepped inside and closed the door behind her, her eyes never leaving his. "There are things about us that you don't know," she said, her voice low. "Things you may not understand." Mark's mind was racing. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say anything before?" "I wanted to protect you," Alira answered quietly. "But the truth is, you're not just helping us. You're in danger, and so is your world." Mark stared at her, confusion flooding his senses. "In danger? From what?" Alira paused, her gaze shifting to the window as if she was searching for something outside. "There are others, other beings who followed us here. They will come for us, come for you. They will stop at nothing to find us." Mark's heart skipped a beat. "Who are they? What do they want?" Alira looked at him, her face filled with sorrow. "They want power. They will do anything to get it. And they will destroy everything in their path to do so." The room seemed to grow colder, and Mark felt the weight of Alira's words sink in. His hands trembled, and for the first time since meeting them, fear gripped his chest. He had invited them into his home, but now he realized that by doing so, he might have invited something far worse into his life. "Why us?" Mark whispered, barely able to speak. "Why did you come to me?" Alira's eyes softened. "You have something they want, Mark. Something they need. You are the key to protecting this world." Mark didn't understand. He wasn't special. He was just a man, living in a small house on the edge of a quiet forest. What could he possibly have that could be the key to saving the earth? "I don't understand," Mark said, his voice shaking. "What do you mean?" Alira stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "You will understand soon, but you have to decide now, Mark. Will you stand with us? Will you help us protect this world?" The weight of her words settled on his shoulders, and Mark felt his heart racing. The choice before him was no longer simple. He had already opened the door to them, but now he was being asked to protect not just his life, but the entire planet. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Mark said, his voice barely above a whisper. Alira placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip gentle but firm. "You don't have to be ready. You just have to make the decision. We can't do this alone." Mark looked into her eyes, and for the first time, he saw the full weight of their journey, their struggle, and he knew that from this moment on, nothing would ever be the same. The decision had been made. There was no turning back. The secret revealed the days that followed Mark's decision felt like a blur of tension and uncertainty. He could feel the weight of his choice pressing down on him every time he looked at Elira and Lyra. They had settled into his home, but the atmosphere was no longer calm. The quiet, peaceful life he once knew was gone, replaced by a constant sense of unease and anticipation. Elira had told him that there were others who had followed them to Earth. Mark tried to process the information, but his mind struggled to wrap around the enormity of it all. He had thought that by helping them, he was simply doing the right thing. But now, it was clear that this had all been a much bigger decision than he ever imagined. His home, his life, had become a battleground. One evening, as the sun began to set, Elira called Mark into the living room. The look on her face was serious, even more so than usual. The warm glow of the evening light filled the room, but Mark could see the tension in her posture, the way she stood tall, yet burdened with something he hadn't yet understood. "Mark," she said quietly, her voice a low murmur, "it's time you knew everything." Mark took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He had a feeling. This moment was coming, but he hadn't expected it to feel so heavy. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elira turned to face him, her gaze steady and serious. "I've been trying to protect you from the full truth, trying to keep you safe, but there's no more hiding from what's coming." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Mark, we are not the only ones who escaped our home planet. There were other survivors who did not share our ideals. They're here now, on Earth, hunting us." Mark swallowed hard. "What do you mean, hunting? Who are they?" Elira's eyes darkened, her expression hardening as she spoke. "They are beings from a war-torn world, creatures who thrive on power and destruction. They do not care for life, only for control. They believe that if they can find us, they will be able to harness the power of our technology, our knowledge, and use it to destroy entire worlds." Mark's chest tightened. He had known there was something off, but now it was all becoming too real. The fear he had felt creeping up on him the past few days was no longer just fear. It was terror. "We can't let them find us," Mark said, his voice shaky. "We can't let them hurt anyone." Elira's face softened for a moment, a flicker of sadness passing through her eyes. "I know," she said quietly, "but it's not just about us. It's about Earth now. They are powerful, Mark, stronger than you can imagine. If they find us, they will tear this world apart." A chill ran through Mark. He had invited these strangers into his life, and now his world was on the line. But Elira wasn't finished. She stepped forward, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made Mark feel the weight of the situation. "Mark, there is something I need to show you," Elira continued. "Something only you can understand. You see, your world, this Earth, has something we need to survive, something they want to destroy. We cannot do it alone. You must help us. You must stand with us." Mark stared at her, trying to comprehend what she was saying. "What is it? What do we need from Earth?" Elira hesitated before speaking. "It's not just Earth itself. It's the energy here, the way this planet is alive. It's connected to the core of everything, the trees, the oceans, the wind. Your world is full of power, Mark, and the beings that are hunting us, they want to control that power. If they do, it will be the end of everything." Mark took a step back, his mind racing. "But how do I fit into all of this? I'm just a man. What could I possibly do to help you fight them?" Elira's expression softened, and she placed a hand on his arm. "That's just it, Mark. You're not just a man. You are connected to this world in ways you don't understand. We can feel it. We've known it since we arrived. Mark shook his head, still unsure. I don't understand. What do you mean, I'm connected? Alira looked at him for a long moment, as though trying to decide how much to reveal. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but filled with meaning. The energy of this world is not just in the earth or the air. It flows through everything, even through you. Your heart, your soul are tied to this planet in a way that can help us stop them. Mark was stunned. Are you saying I have some kind of power? Alira nodded. You don't know it yet, but yes. That's why you're the key. You are the one who can stop them. Mark's mind reeled with disbelief. A power inside of him. It didn't make sense. But the way Alira was looking at him, so sure, so certain, it made him question everything. Could it be true? Could he really be the one to save them all? I don't know what I can do, Mark said, his voice filled with doubt. I'm just a regular guy. You are more than that, Alira said firmly. You just need to believe in it. Believe in yourself. You're stronger than you think. The room grew quiet, and Mark felt a deep, sinking sensation in his chest. He had been living his life one way, thinking he was just another person in the world. But now, he realized that everything had changed. He had been chosen for something bigger than he could have ever imagined. The truth was out now. The world was in danger, and Mark had a choice to make. Would he embrace the power that lay within him? Would he fight to protect the world, even if it meant risking everything he knew? The silence in the room was thick with the weight of the decision ahead. Mark had no answers, no plan. But one thing was clear, he couldn't turn back now. "Okay," he said finally, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside him. "I'll do it. I'll stand with you. But I need to know everything. I need to understand what's coming." Alira nodded, her eyes filled with pride. "Then together, we will fight. Together, we will stop them." Mark took a deep breath. His life would never be the same, but it had to be this way. The world depended on it. A dangerous visitor. The quiet evening that followed Mark's decision felt almost unreal. It was as if the weight of the world had suddenly settled on his shoulders. The truth had been laid bare, and with it, the realization that his life was no longer just his own. Earth, his home, was now tied to something far larger than anything he could have imagined. That night, Mark sat in the living room, his mind still reeling from the revelation that he had a connection to the planet's energy. Could he really help save Earth? Could he fight off the beings that were hunting Alira and Lyra? The questions swirled in his mind, but there was no time to answer them. As Alira had warned, things were moving too fast. The doorbell rang, breaking his thoughts. He froze, his heart racing. Who could be visiting at this hour? Mark stood up slowly, walking toward the door with hesitant steps. He glanced at Alira, who was sitting in the corner of the room, her eyes narrowed, alert. Lyra was asleep, her small figure curled up on the couch. Mark had the unsettling feeling that they were being watched, not just watched, but hunted. He reached for the door handle and opened it, but when he saw who was standing there, his blood ran cold. A tall figure stood in the doorway, dressed in dark clothing. His face was hidden beneath a hood, but Mark could see the glint of his eyes, a bright, unnatural yellow that seemed to pierce the darkness. The man, if it was even a man, had an air of danger about him, an aura of power that made Mark instinctively take a step back. "Who are you?" Mark asked, his voice trembling despite his efforts to remain calm. The figure didn't answer right away. Instead, He stepped forward, the air around him seeming to hum with energy. Mark could feel the room grow colder, as though the stranger was bringing the chill of space itself with him. "I am not here to harm you." Yet, the figure said in a low, gravelly voice, his tone carrying an edge that sent a shiver down Mark's spine. "But you are in my way." Mark's pulse quickened. "What do you want?" he demanded, trying to sound stronger than he felt. The figure's eyes flashed a dangerous yellow. "I want the alien, the one you've been hiding." Mark's breath caught in his throat. He stepped forward, trying to block the door with his body. "You're not taking anyone," he said, more forcefully than he intended. "Leave, now." The stranger's lips twisted into something resembling a smile, though it was far from friendly. "You don't understand, do you?" he said, his voice colder now. "You're already in this, Mark. This is bigger than you. You've made a choice, and now you will pay the price for it." Before Mark could react, the man raised his hand. There was a sharp, sudden noise, like the crack of thunder. The air around Mark seemed to ripple, and then, without warning, he was thrown backward, slamming into the wall behind him. Pain shot through his body, but his vision remained sharp. He struggled to move, but something held him in place, as though invisible chains were binding him. The stranger stepped inside, his eyes glowing brighter now, his power unmistakable. Alira appeared in the doorway behind Mark, her face hard with determination. She raised her hand, and Mark saw a flash of light pulse from her palm. The force of it collided with the stranger, but it did nothing to stop him. He remained unfazed, like a stone wall, completely unaffected. "You cannot stop me," the stranger said, his voice almost mocking. "I am only here for one thing." Mark, struggling to get up, could barely breathe as he watched the scene unfold. Alira stepped forward, her eyes filled with anger. "You will not take her," she said firmly, her voice cold as ice. The man gave a low, dark laugh. "You think you can stop us? We are beyond your reach, beyond your understanding." He turned, his gaze toward Lyra, who was now awake and standing at the doorway, watching the strange visitor with wide eyes. In that moment, Mark saw something flicker in Lyra's eyes. It wasn't fear, it was something else. She wasn't just a helpless child. She was something more. With a sudden, sharp movement, Lyra raised her hand, and Mark felt the air shift once again. A powerful wave of energy surged from the girl's outstretched fingers, colliding with the stranger's chest. For a moment, everything went still. Mark's heart skipped a beat as the figure staggered back. Surprised by the force of the attack, the stranger's eyes narrowed, and he hissed in anger. "So, she has awakened." He turned to Alira, his voice dark. "This changes nothing. We will come for you, all of you." Before Mark could say anything else, the stranger turned on his heel and disappeared into the night, vanishing as if he had never been there. The room was silent except for Mark's heavy breathing. He slowly stood up, his body aching, and looked at Alira, whose face was pale but resolute. Lyra stood beside her, her expression unreadable. What just happened?" Mark asked, his voice weak. Alira stepped forward, her hand on his shoulder. "That was just the beginning," she said quietly. "They're here now, Mark, and they won't stop until they have us." Mark looked at Lyra, who met his gaze with a quiet intensity. He could see the power in her more than just the energy she had used to push the stranger back. There was something ancient about her, something that went beyond the girl she appeared to be. She wasn't just a child, she was something much more dangerous. "The danger is here," Alira continued. And now, we must prepare. They will come again. And this time, we may not be able to stop them. Mark nodded slowly, his fear turning into a new resolve. There was no turning back now. He had chosen to stand with them, and there was no going back. Whatever was coming, they would face it together, and they would fight. The choice the days after the attack felt like a blur. The stranger's visit had shaken Mark to his core. The air around them seemed to crackle with an electric tension, a constant reminder that the battle was not just about survival, it was about the fate of the planet itself. Alira and Lyra had retreated into themselves, both seeming more guarded than before. Lyra, usually so quiet, seemed to be lost in thought, her eyes distant, her gaze often turned toward the sky. Alira, on the other hand, had become more determined, her every action deliberate as she prepared for the inevitable battle to come. Mark could see the weight of the decision pressing down on her, the fear that had started to seep into her voice. They spent the following days training in secret, honing their abilities, and learning to control the strange energy that flowed. Between them, Mark had been part of their world now for days, yet he still felt like an outsider. The powers they wielded were beyond anything he had ever known, and though he was trying his best to keep up, there were moments when he felt small and weak in comparison. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in soft orange light, Alira called him over. She stood near the window, her eyes focused on something far beyond the trees, watching the shadows grow long. There was a sense of urgency in her movement, in the way her fingers tapped against the glass. "Mark," she began, her voice low and serious, "it's time you understood what we're up against. They will come for us, and we can't afford to be caught off guard again." Mark stood beside her, feeling the weight of her words. He had heard enough to understand that their enemies were powerful, ruthless, and willing to do anything to destroy them. But the question had been nagging him since the stranger's visit. What was his role in all of this? He wasn't one of them. He wasn't like Alira or Lyra, or even the stranger who had shown up at their door. "I don't understand," Mark admitted, his voice tight with frustration. "What am I supposed to do? I'm not like you. I don't have your power, your abilities." Alira turned to face him, her expression softening for the first time in days. She placed a hand on his arm, her grip firm but comforting. "You are more connected to this world than you realize," she said, her voice gentle but filled with meaning. "There is power inside you, Mark. I can feel it." Mark shook his head, still unsure. "I don't feel anything," he muttered. "I'm just a man. How can I fight something like that? How can I fight them?" Alira's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, it felt as though time had stopped. "The power inside you doesn't come from us," she said softly. "It comes from Earth itself, the same energy that connects all life on this planet, plants, animals, even the wind. It runs through you, just as it runs through me and Lyra. You are a part of this world, Mark, and that means you can fight." Mark looked down at his hands, his heart racing. "But how do I use it? I don't even know where to begin." "You've already started," Alira said, her voice steady. "Your connection to the earth has been there all along. You just need to trust it. Trust yourself." The silence between them grew, and Mark's mind swirled with questions. Could he really do this? Could he tap into something he had never understood? The weight of the responsibility felt heavy, pressing down on his chest. But there was something else, something deeper than fear that stirred within him. It was a sense of purpose, a sense of duty that he couldn't ignore. I can't do this alone, Mark said, his voice barely above a whisper. I need your help. Alira smiled, the warmth returning to her eyes. You don't have to do this alone. We'll be with you every step of the way. Just then, Lyra walked into the room, her eyes bright and alert. She had been unusually quiet for the past few days, but now she seemed to be more focused than ever. Are you ready? She asked softly, her voice calm but filled with determination. Mark looked at her, and for the first time, he saw the strength in her. She wasn't just a child, she was a warrior in her own right, a force to be reckoned with. And somehow, in that moment, Mark realized that they were all in this together. This wasn't just Alira's battle, or Lyra's, it was theirs. And he would stand with them, no matter the cost. I'm ready, Mark said, his voice firm. I'll fight with you. Alira nodded, a sense of relief washing over her. Then let's prepare. They will be here soon, and when they arrive, we will be ready. As the evening grew darker, Mark could feel the tension in the air. He had made his choice. He had stepped into a world he never thought possible, and now there was no turning back. The battle for Earth was about to begin, and the choices he made in the coming days would decide not only his future, but the future of everyone on this planet. But even as he prepared for what was to come, a part of him couldn't shake the nagging doubt. Was he really ready for this? Was he strong enough to fight back against the forces that threatened to destroy them all? There was no time to dwell on the answers. The enemy was coming, and Mark had made his decision. Now he had to face it. The final stand. The night fell heavier than it ever had before. The winds outside howled, rattling the windows of Mark's small house, as if the earth itself was warning them. In the distance, faint flashes of light lit up the sky far beyond. The hills, signaling that the enemy was closing in. They were coming. The beings who had followed Alira and Lyra from their destroyed world were no longer hiding in the shadows. The time for hiding was over. Mark stood in the middle of the living room, his muscles tense, his mind focused. Alira and Lyra had been preparing for this moment for days, drawing strength from the land around them, tapping into the power that Mark still barely understood. Alira had tried to explain it, to show him how to connect to the Earth's energy. But every time Mark reached out, he felt nothing, just an empty void. Yet, he knew he couldn't back down now. He had made his decision. He had chosen to fight, to stand with them, even if he didn't know what exactly he was fighting for. Alira, Mark called, his voice quiet but resolute. She was near the window, her gaze distant, as she stared at the flashing lights in the horizon. Lyra was sitting cross-legged in the center of the room, her eyes closed, her focus unwavering. The air around them was thick with energy. We can't do this alone, Mark said, his voice low but full of conviction. Alira turned to face him, her eyes fierce. You're not alone, she said firmly. We're in this together. You've already made the hardest decision. Now we fight. She stepped closer to him, her presence calm yet commanding. Her hand reached out, and Mark felt a sudden surge of warmth, a pulse of energy that was unfamiliar yet comforting. It was like a spark in the darkness, a flame lighting the way. Feel it, Mark, Alira urged, her voice steady. The Earth's power flows through you. It always has. You're more connected than you know. Mark tried to reach out, to grasp the invisible energy that had eluded him all this time. The moment he did, a strange sensation washed over him, like a rush of warmth that filled his chest and arms, spreading down to his fingertips. It wasn't just the earth, but something deeper, something ancient and alive. I feel it, Mark whispered, his voice filled with awe. Alira's eyes softened. That's it. You are ready now. But just as Mark felt the connection grow stronger, a low rumble shook the house. A crackling noise filled the air, and the earth seemed to tremble beneath their feet. The enemy was here. Mark's heart raced. As Alira turned toward the door, her expression hardening. "They're here," she said. "Stay close to us. We fight together." With a surge of energy, Alira raised her hand, and a brilliant light shot from her palm, casting an ethereal glow over the room. Lyra stood as well, her eyes glowing with power. Together, they stood at the ready, preparing for the battle to come. Mark, still unsure of his own strength, stepped beside them. The door burst open with a deafening crash, and the first of the enemies stepped inside. It was a tall figure, its skin black and shiny like obsidian, with glowing yellow eyes. Behind it, more figures appeared, creatures that looked human, but their faces were twisted, their bodies angular and sharp, as if they had been remade in a brutal image of power. "Alira," the leader of the group said in a voice that sent chills down Mark's spine. "You cannot hide forever. The earth belongs to us now." Alira's gaze hardened. "You will never take this world," she said firmly. "You are too late." The leader sneered, his mouth curling into a cruel smile. "You think you can stop us? We've already won." Mark watched as Alira stepped forward, her hand raised, a powerful energy swirling around her. Lyra stood beside her, her small frame glowing with light. Mark's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the tension build. The air seemed to hum with the promise of destruction. In a sudden burst of motion, the leader attacked. A flash of bright light erupted from his hand, aimed straight for Alira. Without hesitation, Alira raised her own hand, a shield of light blocking the attack. The blast ricocheted off her shield, striking the wall and splintering it into pieces. "We will not let you destroy this world," Alira said, her voice unwavering. Mark's eyes shifted to the other creatures behind the leader, who were now moving forward, their eyes fixed on him. Something stirred deep within him, an instinct, a drive to protect. This wasn't just about fighting the enemies in front of him. It was about something deeper, something that went beyond power or control. It was about standing for everything he had ever known, for everything that had brought him here. Without thinking, Mark stepped forward, his body trembling with an unfamiliar energy. He raised his hand, just as Alira had done, and for the first time, he felt the earth's energy coursing through him. It was raw, wild, and untamed, but it was there, and it was powerful. He didn't know how to control it fully, but he knew. He had to act. A blast of energy shot from his fingertips, striking one of the creatures in the chest. The creature stumbled back, falling to the ground, stunned. Mark's heart raced, and he felt an overwhelming surge of power. He wasn't just defending himself anymore, he was defending Earth. The battle raged on, the air crackling with energy. Alira and Lyra fought fiercely, their movements fluid and graceful, their powers weaving together in a symphony of light and force. Mark fought alongside them, his heart pounding, his body fueled by the Earth's energy. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. But just as they thought they were gaining ground, the leader of the group raised his hand, and a dark, swirling energy gathered in the sky above them. "This isn't over," he growled. "You may have won this battle, but the war is far from finished." With a final, deafening roar, the enemy retreated, vanishing into the night. The battle was over for now. The house was in ruins, But the fight had been won. Mark stood panting, his body shaking with exhaustion. He looked at Elira and Lyra, both of whom were breathing heavily, but there was a sense of triumph in their eyes. "We did it," Mark said, his voice filled with awe. "We actually did it." Elira nodded, her face serious. "The first battle has been won, but there is much more to come. They will not stop until they have what they want, but we will be ready." Mark looked out into the night, his heart still racing. The fight wasn't over, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't fighting alone anymore, and that made all the difference. Together, they would face whatever came next, and they would win.